Hello, YouTube world. When we think about Native American history, specifically around 1492, we may often wonder why weren't Native American people also wielding these steel swords or wearing this iron heavy armor? Why is it that the Europeans, the Spanish, and the British who arrived on these shores, blessed with being able to wield such advanced technology, and Native people were not? In this video, I'll be discussing the history of the Iron Age and why it did not reach the Native American people.
While the earliest known evidence of using iron is said to have started in ancient Egypt around 3500 BC, the usage of iron in terms of smelting and the mass production of iron weapons and tools is said to have not really taken off until around 1200 BC in the Hittite Empire, which is in the far western part of Asia, which is now Turkey. So as you can see through this picture, many people were starting to learn how to smelt iron, how to use these tools for their advantage, in which their societies were able to advance and grow. Now with that, I'm not saying that in the Americas, the Incan Empire and the Aztec Empire were not advanced. They certainly rivaled any city in Europe or Asia at the time. But that doesn't go without saying that the use of iron tools and steel would have greatly benefited the indigenous native people even more. So now the question is, how were these other people in the old world able to get these tools? What advantages did they have that indigenous native people did not have at the time? Well, as you can see at this next picture, would be a refinery. And you can see the person on the left. Currently, it looks like he already has iron that he is smelting in a furnace, and the other part of the picture, the two men appear to be hammering away at an already heated part of an iron, likely tool or some sort of weapon. And unfortunately, these types of refineries and furnaces, they took many years to master and create. And when you look at the worldwide picture, you see that there are many civilizations around the world, and they were able to work together to create these amazing places that, unfortunately, the indigenous native people did not have access to because of the geography and the isolation, which I'll get more into the video. You can see in this next picture, this heated piece of iron is being hammered, likely again to form some sort of tool or weapon, and you can also see the anvil as well in this picture. So we may wonder, well, how were the Europeans, who arrived at the Americas, able to have or wield such sharp swords that were able to slice through people? And those swords were likely steel swords, again made from iron. And I'll explain this process to the best of my ability. And that is that first, with iron, you can't just find iron in its natural form. You have to locate ores. And ores were plentiful in Europe and through all of the old world at the time. So once that iron has been mined from the ore, you would need steel. Now, where would you get steel at? Well, first you would have to locate the carbon. And in this picture here, we have our carbon. But then our question is, well, where did the carbon come from? A lot of this carbon did come from coal. Now, how to mine this coal to get the carbon was a very difficult scientific process, which for the length of this video, I won't explain sort of scientific explanation. But essentially, you would have these advanced furnaces called bloomeries, which appeared throughout all of the old world. And these bloomeries managed to heat the iron as well as the carbon in these advanced furnaces. And once you had them melted and put together. They would be hammered out, and I believe the temperature, if I'm not wrong, needed to be around 1,535 degrees Celsius for everything to be heated down. Um, so again, once it was hammered out, you would have a much stronger type of iron, which again was called steel. And this is where we're finally able to move in to these advanced weapons. Again, the sword made from steel. It's extremely sharp. You know, as I mentioned, we're able to cut down many people, um, and then going into armor as well. Many native weapons were not able to pierce this armor because, again, the armor is made from steel. It was much stronger than most native weapons. Now, with that being said, there were the bow and arrows, the tip of the arrow, which I believe was made from obsidian from the Chichimeca people, along with the Guachicils. They were able to pierce Spanish armor. But again, not many weapons were able to do the same, unfortunately. But weapons, again, didn't play the most pivotal role in terms of the war with native people. Moving on to the tools. The farming tools such as a sickle, they're able to make the production of crops much better at a quicker pace. And when you're in charge of a civilization and you have these types of farming tools, that means that all of your essential people that work for you aren't spending their whole time producing crops, and they are able to go into other positions in society and better the civilization. If that's in some sort of administrative role or maybe in education field, anything. And again, when you look at the bigger picture, the Americas were very isolated away from the rest of the old world, where again, the bloomeries, the advancement of technology, the knowledge of chemistry, and all of these things that these civilizations were able to share with one another and advance further. And unfortunately, these types of iron and steel tools did not reach the Americas until 1492. Now, with this all being said, the bronze weapons and the copper weapons and tools that native people were able to create, it was impressive and actually quite extraordinary. As I had mentioned earlier, there were obsidian arrows that pierced Spanish armor. There was the macoit, the very impressive sword-like weapon, in which it was essentially a very flat wooden club, and it was embedded with the obsidian blades. And this type of weapon was able to slash through the horses that Spaniards carried with relative ease, along with Spaniards and other European colonizers. But it's also important to look at in this other picture that the Spaniards came and they were prepared because you can see through the first man here on the left, he had armor basically from below his head to his hips, as well as the other man here who was holding a helmet to protect his head, and then the man on the right having a helmet and a spear type weapon. And I wanted to add in that in this next photo, there were indigenous people that did have a type of helmet that somewhat slightly resembled a European helmet, and maybe in some ways looks even more advanced. As you can see from this man here, I believe he is of the Tinglet tribe, and his face, his forehead, his neck is covered. Now, while this isn't steel, it does look and appear to protect his face. I would like to credit the book Guns, Germs, and Steel, which maybe some of you may have heard, maybe have not heard of. It essentially explains the reason as to why some civilizations in the world advanced further than others. And it was not because of intelligence, some sort of higher advanced ability. No, it was essentially the location, the geography, the extensive trade networks. Again, going back to those in the Americas, the native people, they were not close to any of these civilizations at all. Where if you look at Western Europe, they were in a good location next to the Persian Empire, as well as Egypt, and many other empires in the Middle East. And moving on to the final part of this video, this is where I would like to present my designs that I've been working on. And as you can see, this first soldier here is a native warrior from the Aztec Empire. And through the environment that I created for him, I had tried to have it resemble what the northern part of Mexico might have looked like. And I know that this warrior is a bit of a ways from Tenochtitlan, but we'll just pretend that he is a soldier in the northern outpost for the Aztec Empire. Now, going to his appearance, as you can see, he is covered in armor minus his head. He has a good set of hair on him, and he has two macaweets. Now, why did I give him two macaweets instead of a shield? I thought that, you never really see too many pictures of an Aztec warrior holding two swords, two macaweets, and I just wanted to be different. In his left hand, he is holding a steel macaweet with steel blades. Now, this might be a little bit more heavy for him, so I provided him with another macaweet that was made from the wood plank, and then with the obsidian blades now replaced with steel blades instead. And then moving on to the other photo, I essentially have his helmet on. And what's interesting with the helmet is that if you look at Aztec warriors and what they're wearing, you can see that they do have helmets that bear some resemblance to animals or birds. So I tried to make his helmet look kind of like a bird as much as I could. The beak took a little bit of work, but I threw together what I could. And moving on, we have our Northern Plains warrior. And I know what some people might say, well, where's his shirt at? And if you see many pictures of northern natives and the soldiers and warriors, many of them do not have shirts. Now, I understand that. Some do. But again, this is this is just a drawing. So if you can see here, his shield, you see the emblem on the shield. It does bear resemblance to some northern native shields. And again, they did carry shields up in the Americas, the northern Americas, and Canada. And it's a steel shield, which I think would benefit this warrior just maybe a little bit more. And then you have a sword. And I know this sword may look out of place because there weren't really too many northern Native American soldiers with swords, but I thought that I could try to be a little bit different. This is a different timeline where steel is present. And then you have the dagger, and there were a lot of soldiers in the northern parts of America, specifically the Pacific Northwest part, that did carry small daggers. And then again, the environment, I tried to make it, or have it somewhat bear some resemblance to somewhere in the United States. We can just go ahead and say somewhere in the West Coast. And then finally, moving on to my favorite is the Incan Warrior. He's somewhat tall, has some long hair to him. And if you look at his helmet, it does in fact bear resemblance to an Incan soldier's helmet. It seems to fit on his head quite well, and I know that there is some sort of decorative ornament that would hang from the helmet, but I don't have that present. Now, Incan warriors did have rectangular shields, and as you can see here, he has a very long rectangle shield, as well as a spear that I made the tip in iron. And he also has light steel armor to cover his legs as well as his upper body. And again, his environment is somewhat mountain-like, very much like most of the Incan Empire. And with that all being finished, I would like to say thank you to those who took the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, tell your friends, subscribe, and with that, I will say goodbye.